Hare Krishna. Recently, one of my well-known godbrothers, or well-known to me, not very well-known in the ISKCON world, Triveni Prabhu, passed away. I spoke something about my remembrances of him, and sometime previous to that, not very much, a year or so prior to that, Bhajahari Prabhu passed away. He's another of my godbrothers in England who's well known to the disciples of Srila Prabhupada in England. So he passed away. And when devotees pass away, we usually get some tributes offered to them. And it's often said, well, why wasn't the tribute offered before they passed away instead of afterwards, when anyway they're not there to hear it? So I thought to speak a little bit about devotees who I remember when I first joined, when they allowed me to stay in Bhaktivedanta Manor, and I stayed more or less in England and Ireland in ISKCON, apart from 6 weeks in India, from, must have been around this time of year, in 1975 until, I remember the date, August the 22nd, 1977, I left to go to India with the idea of staying there, which more or less I've done ever since, although from 1979 to 1989 I was based in countries close to India, but with similar cultures. Anyway, I thought I'd speak about those devotees because I owe a debt to all of them. There was no Bhakti program in those days, and there was no training as per se. You just joined, that's all. The idea of the Bhakti program hadn't been dreamed up. It came up shortly after that. So I'm just going to speak. This won't be a very not philosophical talk. I don't know how much interest it'll be to all of you, but it's just something that I feel I have to do out of gratefulness to all these devotees. I owe so much to all of them. Before getting into it, I'll just speak a few words about all of them. I don't even remember much about many of them actually, because it was a long time ago, and how much can you remember with a Kali Yuga memory? Before getting into that, I'll just read from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, chapter 10, text 4. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, before listing the names, he lists so many names of prominent devotees of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and some of them in the list he gives a little bit of indication about their personalities, but later in Chaitanya Charitamrita he will describe the pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and of course his prominent devotees are very much part of those pastimes. So the prominent devotees get a little bit mentioned in the just when the names are being listed in the beginning of Chaitanya Charitamrita, and later on the pastimes are described in more detail. However, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami writes, Chaitanya Goshair Joto Parishad Choi Guru Loghu Bhava Tar Nahoi Nischoy. The associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were many, but none of them should be considered higher or lower. This cannot be ascertained. Joto Joto Mahanta Koila Ta Shaba Ganon Keho Kori Bare Nare Jeshta Loghu Krom. All the great personalities in the line of Lord Chaitanya enumerated these devotees, but they could not distinguish between the greater and the lesser. In other words, they're all great. There may be gradations. Definitely, Rupa and Sanatan are very prominent in the pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but from our platform, they're all worshipable. Ataiv ta shabare kari namaskar nama matra kari dosh nalo bayama. I offer my obeisances unto them as a token of respect. I request them not to consider my offenses. So in the same way, I'm going to mention some of the names of the devotees I can remember, quite a lot of them actually, and just a little bit about all of them. In the beginning, it'll be devotees who I remember just when I first joined, and then after that, it'll just be random, like that. I won't be speaking much about Matajis because we really didn't have much to do with them. They're all great personalities, no doubt, but I don't remember much about them, hardly even their names, to tell the truth. There was no spirit of animosity or enmity or hatred that I can remember. I've heard about it, that was there in America, that the women were mistreated and this and that, but I don't remember any such thing in England. So the reason I may not be mentioning much about the Mataji is because we didn't really, as brahmacharis, we didn't have much to do with them at all. So, I'll go in the beginning. The first devotee I remember, it wasn't the first devotee I spoke to. What happened is, I came into Bhaktivedanta Manor. It was a Sunday, it must have been around 4 o'clock, something like that. And I had this idea that I'd seen so many people with so many ideas, and I thought I should commit myself to something. If I'm going to make any spiritual progress, I have to commit to something. I can't just do it by myself. But I'd have to be convinced philosophically. That was my point. That I wasn't going to just go into something sentimentally. And I was vegetarian, accepted the reincarnation, and had some idea that God is a person. I didn't like impersonalism, hated it. But I really didn't have any. I read Srila Prabhupada's Krishna book, volume 2, liked it, but I didn't really understand much about it at all. So anyway, it wasn't the first devotee I spoke to. I think it was the second, because I was trying to get someone to talk to me. It's difficult to get anyone to talk. Everyone was busy doing this and that. So then Narahari spoke to me. It's the first devotee I remember speaking to. And then I was quite pushy with my question, why should I accept this? And why should I accept this? And he said, I remember I said, well, you say this, but then Guru Maharaji will say this. And he got angry and said, he's bogus, Guru Maharaji, which I accepted, but still the point. Still the point that you're just saying this, why should I accept what you say? And he said, well, because we follow ancient scripture. That was the point. I got that. That I could accept that. And then everything else fell into place because reincarnation was there, belief in God was there, dedication was there, and the devotees, they're just so blissful. There's obviously something real going on, and it was definitely something I could commit to. And Narahari himself was quite a character, engaged in what were considered scandalous activities at the time. You think I'm going to talk about something really bad? Well, it was considered really bad. On the traveling sankirtan party, they used, the party that he took out, they used to drink Tizer, which is a soft drink. It's not really, something like Limca, not really, but it's a fizzy drink with sugar and chemicals. So that was considered scandalous. And they would eat cornflakes. Because it was considered so bad to eat anything made by non-devotees. But you say, anyway, it's just sugar and gas, what's the problem? And cornflakes is just some... So that... There was a story I heard about him that one time on his the traveling sankirtan van with all the books, they parked it on a beach in front of the cliffs and went off for a japa walk. When they came back, they saw the tide had come in and the van was going in and out, smashing against the cliff. That was a well-known story of him. Many of the things I'm going to tell about the devotees, they're really what you might call frivolous or inconsequential anecdotes. But I'm just whatever is in my mind, I can say. For breakfast every day at Bhaktivedanta Manor, because the Indian people coming would donate sacks of semolina, farina, and sugar, and there was milk from the cows. So put that together, you have milk, semolina, and sugar. That was the breakfast every day. And Mahaprasad, everyone got a tiny, tiny little bit, a little liner, because there was no money in the temple. So there was very little Mahaprasad being cooked, and everyone would get a tiny, really, this much you get in your hand. And they'd line up, because that was the sense gratification for the day. So, but when you're on traveling sankirtan, you can buy your own bhoga. So I remember one time he had this bowl of this semolina and a big pile of sugar in it. He'd put extra sugar. I'd say scandalous personality. So, and then I said, hey, Narahari, that's going to be too sweet. And he reasoned that, well, if you eat sugar, it's not too sweet. So if you mix it with something else, then what's the problem? Something like that. Many of the devotees, I don't remember much about them, but I do remember them in kirtan, or I remember even the sound of their chanting japa. When I'm going through all these names, in many, many cases, I remember how they did kirtan and or how they chanted japa. So I remember Narahari with his eyes closed, quite a big body, and he would lead kirtan with his eyes closed, playing mridanga, and really absorbed in chanting the holy names. He was from Wales, and Wales is England is a small country, and to the west of it is another even smaller country called Wales. And most Welsh people are from Methodist or this kind of Protestant and churches where they do singing in choirs. So it's a big part of the Welsh culture, which is a little bit different from the English culture, to have singing in choirs. So that's good for kirtan, isn't it? So many of the devotees from Wales, they were, just like we find so many devotees from Bengal are good kirtan singers. So many of the Welsh devotees they took very naturally to kirtan, and they're very good kirtan leaders. So Narahari was one of them. I don't know, Advaita Acharya. He was a bit shy, but he still today leads beautiful kirtan. Bhajahari, Vichitravirya, there are others, but I just can't remember their names just now. They're all good, strong voices. Of course, Vichi would lose his voice chanting kirtan so much. How Narahari got married, there was one Mataji from Australia joined. She was called Gokula Rani, and we heard this, that Himavati, who is called Himavati, many of the names are mispronounced. The wife of Hansadutta Prabhu, Himavati told Gokula Rani, if you want him, you have to go and get him. So Gokula Rani, fell down at Narahari's feet and said, you got to marry me? And he married her. This is the story we heard. It may or may not be true. It's told the stories the brahmacharis heard. So he's a very good father. I saw him in Australia last time I was there, which was a long time ago, with his family, his boys. One time I went with him and his wife. We went somewhere in London to do some life member enrollment. So we usually have to go at night because people are busy working in the day. And we've been up since 3:30 in the morning. So we were all sitting there preaching to these people. Then Narahari would say something. And then his wife would say something. And while his wife was speaking, Narahari and me would fall asleep. And then it was my turn to say something, and those two would fall asleep. So one of us would be awake while the other two were asleep. So it went on like this. And anyway, the man didn't become a member. And so then we finished, and another man, his friend came from Leicester, which is another city in England where there are many Gujaratis. And we don't preach to him at all. And said, oh, life membership, I'd like to become a life member. So that was one thing I remember. Another I remember in the, when I first joined was Triveni Prabhu. When I joined, and I think they didn't know what to do with me because no one had joined for quite some time, and there's a reason for that, because they stopped distributing books because they had to pay the mortgage on the manor, and there's another whole story behind that. So they were selling records. So it's not very inspirational. Books make devotees, records don't, hardly. So I don't think they knew what to do. So I joined, and then they sent me with Triveni. He was looking after the cows. So I think even before Mangalati, or maybe it was just after Mangalati, we go out to the cows. And then he gave me this thick milk to drink from the newly born, the cow. And I took it. He said, actually, you're not supposed to take that. But anyway, it's full of vitamins and everything. Again, I remember his japa. He was very, very sweet devotee. It's in almost like singing the way he would, because he was busy all morning, and then he would just be in the brahmachari ashram chanting his japa, and almost like singing the way he would chant. Now, Bhajahari, who was the town president, as soon as I joined, he said, well, I want to shave my head also, like everyone else. He said, no, you wait. Let's see if you make it, first of all. It seemed he didn't think I was going to make it. And then after 2 or 3 days, Triveni said, well, why don't you shave your head? I said, well, the town president told me not to. And then Triveni said, anyway, I'll shave you. So he shaved me. And Bhajahari wasn't very happy with that. And that's what I remember of him. He left afterwards. I didn't know later, until he died, that actually he was a homosexual, and he felt ashamed, and so he left. But he preached among all the homosexuals and gave them in the whole homosexual community, and many of them were. They said that, well, if he's a devotee, then Hare Krishna must be good. So make of that whatever you like. Radha Krishna, another devotee, he was the secretary at the manor. So he and his wife, both of them, very enthusiastic, still is very enthusiastic. What happened, I went to the manor, I decided to join, but I thought I'd go back to my father's house where I was staying, because I'd been living in Ireland, and I'd posted a whole bunch of possessions, all kinds of useless things from Ireland. I was waiting for them to come, and it was getting delayed coming, so I phoned up the manor, Bhaktivedanta Manor. It was just 12 miles from my father's house, and said, well, I got all the, oh, maybe they did come, yeah, and I said, I got all this stuff, could someone come and pick me up? So he came over he probably doesn't remember this, came over in his Volkswagen Beetle. He had his little car. He actually had a car. Very few devotees had cars, private cars. He must have had that before he joined. He had joined less than a year before I joined, so he picked me up in that. he gave me time as a new joiner. He gave me time, and he would, because I had so many questions, and he was always very enthusiastic, tell me so many things, and share things with me. He had time for me, which was good because most of the devotees were too busy, and this young boy asking so many stupid, what to them must have seemed like really stupid questions, but he was always very accommodating to me. Someone else who took time to talk to me and preach to me. One evening, he took 2 hours. He just sat with me for 2 hours. I had so many questions. Because basically I accepted I wanted to be in Krishna consciousness. The basic things seemed right, and I knew I had to commit, so I committed I got to commit to this. But naturally I had so many questions. It's very unusual. It's something, I had no idea of it before I joined it. And the philosophy and so many things. I was fascinated by the teachings. So he took time to speak to me so many things, and I was very grateful to that. Also, Partha Prabhu was preaching among India. The Indian preaching was really beginning and picking up. There's a large community, especially of Gujaratis in London and elsewhere, and Punjabis also at that time. Not only Sikhs, but also Hindus. So there are many of them in London and adjoining towns and in other parts of England. So part of that was his, he was one of the devotees who was assigned to preach to the Indians, which meant to enroll them as life members and to cultivate them in Krishna consciousness. So he took me to they'd organized a program somewhere in London for the Indian people. And I went to the program, and I'd put on a dhoti, but no one actually showed me how to put on a dhoti, and I didn't really know how to put it on. And he saw me, and he come on the stage, and he said, "Come with me." He said, "Come with me. You can't come on the stage like that." And so he showed. I'd been wearing a dhoti for several days, but I didn't really know how to do it. And if no one shows you how to do it, you can try and imitate, but you wouldn't know how to do it. Just like if we asked you to put on a sari, would you know how to do it? You could have some idea, but you wouldn't know how to do it. I wouldn't also, for that matter. So he showed me that. He obviously thought I was quite a fool, which I definitely was. Again, I remember his kirtans. We used to have, after Guru Puja, every day at Bhaktivedanta Manor. Mostly the householders were staying at Bhaktivedanta Manor. I'm not sure, I don't think he was married at that time. And the brahmacharis would be in central London in the famous Berry Place temple. So we had really excited kirtans every day about 7:30 in the morning after the Guru Puja. And different devotees would lead them. Partha would lead. And his favorite was the Gaur Nityananda Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. You go on and on and on with it. Later on we learned that Prabhupada wasn't super enthusiastic about it. He was. Now, quite some time after that, it must have been, I don't know, maybe 20 years after that. 20 years after I left England, I was in America, in St. Louis, doing some program. And one young woman came up to me, Western woman, wearing a sari, and said, "Oh, my father's a Prabhupada disciple." I said, "Oh, really? Where from?" He said, "From London." "Oh, what's his name?" She said, "Partha." I said, "Oh, Partha, oh." And she was so happy that I was happy. So that was a very good experience. Kishore Prabhu, very sweet-natured. Of course, every devotee, everyone has their own personality, so very sweet-natured and humble devotee. Two things in particular I remember about him, apart from his being Scottish. If you're in England and someone's Scottish, you know they're Scottish because the way they talk, their accent is quite different. So two things I remember about him, because he must have been recently married, and he gave me an orange-colored kurta. And he said this was washed in the Ganga, in the Ganges, when he was there. Now that was a big thing in those days, because we didn't get things from India. There hardly anything's coming from India. And to get a kurta washed in the Ganges was a big thing for us. So he gave that to me, because he no longer was wearing orange cloth. So that's one thing I remember. I'm very unlikely he remembers it. Then another thing I remember was that about him is that we got when Srila Prabhupada was translating Chaitanya Charitamrita, and he was getting behind on production, but then Prabhupada pushed the devotees in Los Angeles to publish all those unpublished volumes of Chaitanya Charitamrita. So they all came out at once, and then just one copy would come to each center. And then the leading devotee, if the GBC was there, he'd get it first, and then the next, and then so he had one day to read it. And I was nowhere. I was still catching up with Bhagavad Gita and all this. I wasn't in the line at all for reading the new books that came out. So whoever got a book, they would take it away and read it all day, because they only had one day to read it. So one evening, I remember I saw him coming out of what is now the guest room. I'm not sure, I think it was the guest room even then, at Bhaktivedanta Manor. I saw he was crying, so I said, "Why are you crying?" I just knew, And he was holding Chaitanya Charitamrita, and he said, "If you read Chaitanya Charitamrita and you don't cry, then you're not a devotee." That was a very beautiful incident. I met him recently, last time I was in London, on the Harinam. And also there was a Harinam Sankirtan in London Saturday night, and also there was Sakshi Gopal Prabhu, who's been going out on Harinam in London since the 1970s. He was leading Kirtan last time I was there, and he regularly goes out. Now the thing I remember most about him it was him and Bhumadev, two devotees. Together they used to put on a drama every week at Bhaktivedanta Manor, and these dramas were so touching to the heart. Everyone looked forward to seeing. Somehow they got together a superb drama every week, not with many actors. One in particular, I remember, the drama of Sakshi Gopal. I'm talking about the devotee Sakshi Gopal, and he and Bhumadev Prabhu organized the drama of Sakshi Gopal, the story in Chaitanya Charitamrita. It was really that there was one Indian boy, he must have been, 16 years old, and quite Indians in comparison to English people, the average height is a little less. Maybe he's a little younger, maybe 14 or 15. So he was dressed as Krishna. And in the drama, you don't see Sakshi Gopal. You just hear the tinkling of his feet as the young Brahmin is walking and walking and walking. You hear his voice. And then at one point when the Brahmin turns around, and then you can see, and then they show Sakshi Gopal. And I guarantee everyone in that room just cried. There's Sakshi Gopal and Bhumadev. They really, in the dramas they organized, they really brought out the Bhakti and communicated that to everyone. Bhajahari Prabhu's name I already mentioned. He's my first temple president. Tough character. Got on my case a lot, for which I'm very grateful. Loved Harinam. As a temple president, he'd had so many managerial responsibilities which seemed to weigh him down. It was hard for him, no doubt. It would have been hard for anyone The Manor was in debt. They had all this whole institution to support with not that much income. It was difficult. He used to take the devotees out regularly on Harinam Sankirtan in London and play the mridanga and chant. He had a very strong voice which would carry a long way. And what to say? It's very. He's really calling out to Krishna when he's chanting. Just one thing I remember. There was a life membership form. I saw a life membership form. And he was there, and I said, I want to be a life member. It's just when I was joining. He said, no, you can't be a life member. I said, well, I want to be a life member. He said, no, that's not for you. And I thought, well, why can't I be a life member? I want to be a life member. He said, no, he said, it's only for Indians. I thought that was strange. And then afterwards I understood that by joining the temple, you actually give your life. You don't just become a member for life, but you actually give your life. It's somewhat different. I think it was £108 at the time. They would get on my case regularly for all the stupid things that I did. One thing I remember, he got really angry with me because there were the curtains on the windows in the temple room. And I was taking the ghee lamp around to everyone, and then when I'd finished, I put it on the back, on the ledge, just quite close to the curtain, and he got on my case like anything. You're crazy. The whole building will burn down because it's wooden panels. You got your hand on your mouth. What should you do? One very good advice I got from him, which affected my life. Even before joining, I thought that I don't want to marry, it's too much hassle. It's just too much. But then after I joined, I thought that, well, there are so many householders here in Krishna consciousness, they all seem to be quite happy. So I mentioned it to him once. He told me, Prabhu, don't marry. It's just not worth it. I said, okay. He should know. He's married. He's telling me. So that was very good advice I got from him. Nothing against the householders, but I encourage you to go on with your life as you know, but from my perspective, I'm very grateful for that. After I got Brahminical initiation, I used to cook a lot. So one time I cooked some preparation, I can't even, Maha Brinjal we used to call it. And it was basically brinjal, eggplants with a lot of ghee and some spices. So I cooked it with a lot of ghee. It was some feast day. And then the next day we all went on Harinam Sankirtan and everyone, they lost their voice. No one had a strong voice. He said, because you put too much ghee there. He wasn't angry, but just made the point. I got on he noted once when I was overeating, I had a huge amount of prasadam and my stomach got upset. And he said, yeah, of course, overeating. So just a few things I remember. Oh, there's one time, that I remember. That Srila Prabhupada came to the Manor and then he went out on a morning walk and naturally everyone wanted to go. And then I was, because it wasn't advertised, but just because you can imagine Srila Prabhupada can't walk with 200 people or something like that. So the leaders were, especially Bhajahari, he was trying to get Prabhupada out without anyone knowing. But then I was in the hallway, and he said, Prabhupada's going on a morning walk. And then Bhattacharya said, no, he said to me, don't you, can't go. And then Satyavak, he said, I'm going anyway, come on, let's go. So I don't know exactly how, and then we went anyway. So that's something I remember. But there was a big crowd and I didn't hear anything Prabhupada said. Tanu Madhya, another devotee, he was on my case a lot. I can't remember exactly what for, but naturally when you're new you do lots of things wrong. And so he would let me know. Thank you. That's the way you get trained. If you don't know what you're doing right and someone tells you you're doing something wrong, then you learn quickly. Especially, I told you I was waiting for so many possessions to come. So I got them all. You see, so many clothes and boots and all. I had these boots for walking in the country, which would be useful at the manor for the gardens and this and that. So I had this locker. Everyone got one locker about this size, and you could put it. So I crammed everything in there. And one day he saw that Tanuman and he said, "A brahmachari shouldn't have so many possessions." So that was it. That was the end of all of them. I cleaned that out. I don't see many of these devotees like Tanu Madhya. I saw him later on, but I'm just after I left England. I saw him in different places. But I'm just speaking about my memories in England. Okay, Vichitravirya. I joined in Bhaktivedanta Manor, and then after about 2 weeks, I was sent to Berry Place, which is the center in Berry Place is the name of a small street in central London, and we had our temple there, and we used to call it we just used to say Berry Place, our temple in Berry Place. So Vichitravirya was the temple there, temple president there. A very, very good-hearted, remembered and loved by so many devotees even now. Later on he became the temple president at the Manor. He took over from Bhajahari Prabhu, and he was temple president there for quite some time. And then later, after I left England, he was brought to Detroit, and then he lived Detroit in America. He was brought to be the temple president there. And then he lived pretty much the rest of his life in America. And he passed away maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. I spoke to him on the phone just shortly before he passed away. Just one memory. I have several memories of him. One thing, he was town president, but even to a very young devotee like me, with everyone, he was very personable and kind. He didn't take a position like I'm the big boss here. Nothing like that. I just remember one kirtan on Nrsimha Chaturdashi in Bhaktivedanta Manor. And it really went wild, the kirtan. We had lots of really ecstatic kirtans in those days. And he was playing the mridanga, and he was leading the kirtan and playing mridanga, and just got more and more enthusiastic. At one point he just fell over, and there he was lying on the ground playing he hadn't even noticed that he'd fallen over. And with this completely ecstatic look on his face, he just went on singing and leading and playing the mridanga, with all the devotees surrounding him and playing the kartals and everything. So that was one great experience, one memory. And Berry Place, once he mentioned to me, he was having some problem that the GBC, that must have been Hansadudra at the time, had apparently made some comment that the Sankirtan leader is even more important than the temple president. So that statement was taken out of context by the Sankirtan leader at Berry Place, who therefore said, "Okay, I'm in charge of you, all of you. You don't do what the temple president says. You just do what I say." And you can't. How can you organize a temple president? How can you organize a temple if someone oversteps you like that. So he mentioned that to me. I was having so much trouble with the temperance, with the sankirtan leader, who was a bit of a nutcase. Then I was at Bhaktivedanta Manor. I was there. How to engage me, because I couldn't go on book distribution because I very much wanted to do book distribution, but because my body was in bad shape, I couldn't do it. So he told me one time, you should write. He said, at the time I didn't have any inclination to write. I said, write what? Write some essays. At that time I didn't have any inclination. Later I did. He said at one time, oh yeah, then I was put on the Bhakti program. And I was on, the Bhakti program had started by that time, so I was put on the Bhakti program under Dhanavir Das Vanachari, now Dhanavir Goswami. And after about 1 or 2 months on that, I was on that, and then Vichitravirya called me into his office at Bhaktivedanta Manor and said that, well, Hare Krishna, it's a boring talk. He said that, actually we want to send you to the Berry Place Temple. The situation in the Berry Place Temple, there are very few devotees there because of some court order. They weren't able to keep so many devotees there. So a few devotees have to stay there just to keep the place running on. And he said that, actually, we appreciate your service in the Bhakti program, but we think you're not able to do it properly because I was so young. I joined at 18, and at that time I must have been 19 or something like that. And the people joining, they won't respect you or follow you because you're too young. So he moved me on, so to speak, but in a very, very nice way. During that talk, he was talking to me in his office, and he said he thought that in the future I'd be an important leader in the movement, which I never thought, because I was just a newcomer. One time, I used to be in the kitchen a lot in Bhaktivedanta Manor after I was Brahmanically initiated, and there was one devotee, Sadananda. He was from New York. His father was a cook, his grandfather was a cook, and he was a cook. And he'd been in Mayapur. And he was used to cooking for large numbers of people. So he was I think he was the first who really taught me to cook Indian preparation. Because in those days, we only cooked Indian preparations. We didn't cook anything else. Prabhupada taught to cook Indian preparations. And then another one who taught me was Mahakarta from Sri Lanka, who joined in Germany, and somehow he ended in the kitchen in Bhaktivedanta Manor. So he taught me so many. So these two taught me to cook. And others also, but especially these two I remember. So Sadananda had this habit of, when he wasn't cooking, of talking about all kinds of things. And I was someone who obliged him. So we were talking in the hallway, and then Vichitravirya comes along one time and just sees us, and he starts chanting one verse, Prajalpa Niyamagraha, without saying, hey, you're in Maya, you're talking nonsense, just as if he's reciting a verse, reminding us that we shouldn't be talking Prajalpa. Okay, I'll finish there and hope to continue this. Probably it may take 3 sessions or 4, I don't know. Like I say, no philosophy, but I offer my respects to all these devotees and to all the devotees everywhere. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhuvya vichapatidanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. bit of a different kind of class. Huh? Not really a class. Questions? You want to ask a question? Question? Okay.
How you develop desire to come to India?
How did I develop a desire to come to India? Well, maybe I'll speak about that later.
Yes, one session.
Not a whole session, it's a very simple thing. You'll be surprised when you hear it.